Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Litchfield Planning Board meeting of August 17th, 2021. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We will skip the appointment of alternates and go right to roll call. Michael Croto, Chair.
Kate Stevens, Vice Chair.
Ron Stevens, member.
Kimberly Queenan, Selectman's Rep.
James Buffetti, member.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. And hello, Jay. Our circuit rider, Jay Mankara, is here this evening as well. Okay. Before I get started with the agenda this evening, I'm just going to do a quick public input on non-agenda items. Are there any items not on the agenda for this evening that anybody here in public wishes to discuss? Okay. Hearing none, I will close public input on non-agenda items and we'll go to the first order of business this evening. Declaration of covenants and restrictions for conservation purposes. Brookfield Acres, map 15, lot 14, -15. Is the applicant present?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Morgan Hollis. I'm an attorney at Gottesman and Hollis in 39 East Pearl Street in Nashua. And I'm here representing the McQuestion Family Trust, which is the owner of the property. And with me is John Noseworthy, trustee. And seated next to me is representative as well, Richard Charbonneau. This matter comes before you because we're here on a question regarding restrictive covenants that were imposed for a subdivision which was approved by you back in November of 2019. And for your convenience, I've provided you with copies of the minutes of the meeting, which I'll reference in a second. I also provided you with copies of the Declaration of Covenants and Restrictions with the provisions that I would like to discuss highlighted. And I've provided you a copy of the plan as approved, the relevant 2 pages. This, as I said, was approved on November 5th, 2019. You voted to approve the subdivision creating lots off of Hillcrest Road with a new road, Firefly Way. One lot was off of Charles Bancroft Highway, and that lot was identified as lot 14-15. The approval was conditioned upon restrictive covenants reserving use for agricultural and one barn with a driveway subject to town planning board approval. And the covenants were to be reviewed by Jay and town council prior to recording of the plan. I prepared a draft in June of 2020. I submitted it to the town. Jay reviewed it. Town council reviewed it. We ended up with a final product, and it was recorded in July of 2020 at the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds, and the plan was recorded at the same time. So we have a recorded subdivision with declaration. Referring to the minutes, which I gave a copy of to you, if you turn to page 4, at the top of page 4 is the reference that I'm going to speak about. And it says the 16th lot on Route 3A would be deed restricted, a non-livable lot, but possible barn and agricultural use in the future. Then again, the highlighted portion goes down to Kim questioning the deed restriction and possible future of lot 16. And the engineer, Mr. Tucker, referenced the driveway and a barn are allowable on lot 16 per zoning on designated open space. Lot doesn't need to be deeded to the town. Jay indicated a deed restriction can be any number of things. The lot is designated open space by ordinance in perpetuity. And then the consensus of the board was town council and planning board will review and approve the deed restrictions for the open space. Lot 16, the access from Route 3A, to be privately held with rights to put a barn on that parcel. And then the motion was made, and as you can see below, there's reference to the easement language and for deed restrictions. So I guess on page 5, it says JM to review deed restrictions on open space lot before sending to town council. So that was the precursor. That is what you folks reviewed and approved back in 2019. In 2020, after several tweaks to the plan and final plan presented to the board, the Declaration of Covenants was also drafted and submitted to Jay and to town council and ultimately approved. If you look at the Declaration of Covenants, which I presented, you can see it's referencing Lot 14-15 on Plan 40619, and I provided a copy of that plan. The purpose of the restrictions and covenants are on page 1, the protection of the natural habitat of the property and the preservation and conservation of open spaces, particularly including without limitation the conservation of the forest land and the wildlife habitat on the property and the scenic enjoyment thereof. Turning to page 2, the use restrictions sort of begin with the most important part. Shall be maintained in perpetuity as open space without there being conducted thereon any residential use or industrial, commercial, or commercial forestry activities, except such activities as are required for proper forest management and is specifically reserved herein. The rest of them talk about what's prohibited on the use of that property, which would be consistent with that limitation. If you turn to page 3, it is the specific reserved rights for the declarant. And there are 2 reserved rights, what I call A and B here. A is the declarant reserves for itself and its successors entitled to the property, reserves the right to use the property for agricultural activities, which may include animal husbandry, floricultural and horticultural activities, the production of plant and animal products for domestic or commercial purposes, the growing, stocking, cutting, and sale of Christmas trees or forest trees of any size capable of producing timber or other forest products, and the processing and sale of products produced on the property, such as pick-your-own fruits and vegetables and maple syrup. Provided, however, no such use shall be allowed within the portion of the property identified as proposed area of deed restriction as shown on the plan. Declarant, under B, declarant for itself and its successors entitled to the property reserves the right to construct and maintain structures used for agricultural and or conservation purposes, such as a barn or ancillary structures and improvements, including but not limited to bridge, culvert, drainage, swale, or walking trail as necessary in the accomplishment of the forestry management, conservation, and agricultural uses of the property, subject to approval by the planning board and provided they are not detrimental to the scenic, historic, and wildlife protection purposes of this declaration. A septic system serving the permitted structure shall be allowed subject to approval by the planning board. So we have a restriction in the first one that says this is what the declarant reserves the right to do, which is agricultural nature, including a farm stand of some nature and pick your own. And B is the structure of the barn and the ancillary improvements necessary, such as roadways, drainage swales, trails, etc. In A, however, it says, provided, however, no such use shall be allowed within the portion of the property identified as proposed area of deed restriction. Go to the plan. I think that's consistent with your minutes, and that's what the intent was. So highlights on the recorded plan, obviously, but the explanation. There are 2 highlights. The first page, there are areas that are what's known east of the line of the former railroad. So we have a former railroad area. And then to the right of that, there's a highlight showing proposed area of deed restriction. And of course, there's a public service easement in there. And then you have some wetlands demarcations on the map, little signs of wetlands. If you go to page 2, a portion of that is enlarged. And that's the area immediately east of the former railroad. And it's highlighted. Now, there are 2 areas that, in this area that, on the front page, I think I highlighted 2 areas. On the second page, did you get a page that has 2 areas highlighted or 1? Yeah, it should be 2. The upper one as well. Why I've highlighted them on the first page, and should have done it on the second page, is Those are the areas that are currently farmed. They're not in the wetland. There were crops grown out there. You probably drove by. I saw it was mowed tonight. A portion of it was mowed. And it was everybody's understanding that that area was also going to be allowed to be agricultural. But if you look at the plan, the proposed area of deed restriction is in one particular shade. There's no legend on the plan, but it certainly could be read on page 2. If you look at the dots would consistently seem to indicate the area that's even buildable. It's within a building area, but it's clearly been farmed because it's not in the wetlands, are in the proposed deed restriction area on the plan. So what came up was, well, does that mean everything east of the railroad tracks can't be farmed, can't be used? That would be inconsistent with past use, and I think inconsistent with what was presented and approved at the planning board. But as you can see, the document, and I take full responsibility for this, it looks like there was a disconnect between what I saw on the plan and what was intended. And the intent of the drafting was it should be anything that's in the wetland. Anything east of the railroad tracks, it's in the wetland, is not going to be touched for anything. No agriculture, no structure. And the reason why I say it looks like it, I think it's pretty clear it's a drafting disconnect here, drafting error, is on B, they reserve the right to put a building in an area wherever they could put a building, subject to your approval. And it's not specifically restricted in this document. So one could put a barn there, but you couldn't grow crops, which doesn't make sense. And what we're here to do is try to get a clarification and a clear understanding from the planning board. We did go to the Conservation Commission first, made a presentation, and I think it's fair for me to summarize that the Conservation Commission were positive in affirming that, yes, that would be their desire as well, that they would like to allow agricultural use, but no structure on that side. And I don't know if that got transmitted to you or not. They were going to try to, but I know Mr. Croto, the chairman, is on.
You have a letter here from August 15, 2021. I can read it into the record. Declaration of covenants and restrictions for conservation purposes, map 14, lot 14-15. Chair Croto and honorable planning board members, the Litchfield Conservation Commission reviewed and discussed the covenants and restrictions for conservation purposes on the property located at map 15, lot 14-15 at our August meeting. The commission voted 6-0-1 to support the agricultural activities within the property where farming has historically occurred in highlighted areas on the property. Please see map from Brookfield Acres for highlighted portions of the property in question. Respectfully submitted, Matthew Lepore, Chairman, Litchfield Conservation Commission.
And the highlighted areas would be the same as page 1 of the sheet, not my page 2, which was there, should include it. I think, as was presented at that Conservation Commission, the overall concern we have is it has been used as agricultural. Anybody who's looked at that lot now for purchase, as you know, there's a for sale sign up there. This issue has come up. Well, can we farm what's been historically farmed? And it's not clear on these documents that you can. We may need to clarify them, which would require us probably to go to the town Board of Selectmen and get an amendment to this document if we couldn't get a letter that just says, we interpret it to say you can do it. I'd prefer to clarify it. That'd be the right way to do it, be an amendment, but I'm sure they're going to look to the planning board. Planning board ought to have an answer. So our concern is if we can't farm it, if we can't use it for agriculture, it becomes overgrown. Eventually, it just becomes a jungle because it's not wetlands where there's a limitation on what actually grows in wetlands. It just becomes a jungle. I think as Mr. Charbonneau pointed out, there's an area across from your library that sort of lapsed into that status. And it would be nice to keep this. I think the intent was to make it a view, agricultural view, and this would be the way to do it. So specifically, we're asking the planning board to vote that they agree with the intent of the approval back in 2019 was to allow agricultural uses in the area between the trolley track easement and the power line, which uses have always been farmed and which are not in the wetlands, and vote to be in favor of a change in the covenants, restrictive covenants confirming that interpretation. So that's specifically what we're looking for. You could also piggyback the language of the Conservation Commission if you want, but that's what we're here for. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay.
And we are okay if the building can only be west of the trolley car track, if that's a concern.
State your name.
Rick Charbonneau. So it can be just west of the trolley car track. That's the intention anyway.
We would have to come back here for your approval anyway, for any structure.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for the for Attorney Hollis or Mr. Charbonneau?
I have a question, and it's just general. I hope whoever comes in here has great success. I want to be successful. I just have questions for my own general clarification, not this in particular, although maybe one might be. Open space, you needed the buffer of what, 50 feet, and you know, growing something meets that, right? Whether you can do it or not, well, how they vote's another story. So I'm not questioning that. But I do have a general question on open space, and maybe Jay can help, or if we have to forward it, or maybe you know the answer as well. I don't know which one to ask in order, but I'll ask one randomly. When I looked at your declaration of covenants, and again, I'm not a lawyer, so I need clarification. On page 2, it just seems there might be something redundant or I don't understand. On page 2, line, I guess 2A, the property shall be maintained in perpetuity as open space without there being conducted thereon any residential use or industrial, commercial, or commercial forestry activities. You know, you can read the rest of the sentence. So I look at that and I don't know whoever's going to go in there as a commercial business. But then you are allowed in 3A and B to run a business.
That's right.
So I don't know if this is maybe not in sync properly or one has precedent over the other. I just want to make sure this is okay first.
This set of covenants and restrictions is a standard, uses the basic form of the standard conservation easement the state of New Hampshire has put out for conservation commissions to use. So I started with that format. And in that format, it starts with the exact language which is there. And then there is a section in the form of reserved rights. And typically anything that is other than do nothing is reserved there. And so that's what was reserved under 3A and 3B. So essentially, you are correct in that A under page, that's 2A, says this is what it's for. And then B, C, D says all these other things. You know, you can't do anything that's going to harm species. You can't do any disturbing of the soil that's going to be other than that's necessary for agriculture. These are all, again, standard words and language in the state format that they send out. And then in 3A and 3B are the reserved rights of the person donating the properties, typically done as either a donation or a set of covenants and restrictions, or what everybody calls the conservation easement. You might grant an easement, but you have reservations. So we specifically reserve the things that were, at least I tried to reserve the things that were stated and represented and everybody agreed about. I think that's how I sent it to Jay and to town council for review.
So
That answers your question. There is clearly a conflict, but that's the way they set this up is it's a blanket. You can do nothing unless you reserve it and everybody's agreed on what's reserved.
okay. Jay, you're okay with that? So I'm looking at the intent, and I'm not going to put any words in anybody's mouth at the state level, whether it be fish and game or forestry, or whoever was one of these conservation things. You're thinking were they part of this template? I mean, this seems to be the template if you're saying,
Yeah, I can't speak for who created it and when it was
Yeah.
created. It's been around a long time, and some towns have adopted it and some have not.
so legally, does 3A override 2 or 3A and B?
3A,
Does that
Yeah,
override?
it-
what
it does
was initially
override. It is
declared?
a reserved
Perfect.
right. Yeah, I was going to say. You
I
can
just
use-
wanted to make sure we didn't
Someone
have a
who
problem with
has
the deed
experience.
first before we went further.
I know, I don't like to put board members on the spot.
No, but we have some lawyers here, too, so yeah. And I didn't want to put you on the spot or
No,
put Jay on the spot, because this is back 2 years ago. All right, so that calms me down there. So a general question I have in Litchfield on 3A, anybody that's residential can also be agricultural, which, and you just happen to fall in that as well, and you're declaring to be agricultural. So I tried to look at court cases in New Hampshire, and I didn't find anything at all, but it's a general question of when does a agricultural business based on volume become a problem? And I'm going to say this, and this is the second point, and I'm not trying to confrontational, but I just want to understand something, just for going forward with open space in this town. I'm just doing a simple mathematics. If 10 cars show up a day, that's 50 cars a week, right? I'll do the math. How many ever cars a year? Say it's 20 cars. I don't know if having, I'm going to make up a number, 5,000 cars or 10,000 cars on a driveway, which I know is small, defeats the purpose of open space. And I'm asking that honestly. I'm not trying to be mean. And I tried to find any law to back it up or not, and I didn't find any.
It's a great question, and I'm sure there could be a lot of debate about it, but I've been involved in some of those debates involving horse farms, and when people, have events at horse farms, and whether that's agricultural. I've been involved in debates about you pick 'em and how many cars can park on you pick 'em. And all I can say to you is I don't think there's a bright line, but I think there is a specific intent of preserving agricultural use in the state of New Hampshire. There's a statute about it.
Yeah.
And your town ordinances address your use restrictions. So in this case, specifically, I know the intent was you're not putting any structure up there until you come back to the plan. So I think you have control, the planning board, have control in that means, which is not always the case, by the way. I mean, sometimes it's not, if it's a residential agricultural use, this board wouldn't necessarily have that review. And there could be many farms that have agricultural use that don't come before you. And there isn't that review process.
Yeah, but in open space is what I'm questioning, only because I don't know if whoever at the state level came up with this concept, if they envisioned 2,000 cars or 5,000 cars. That's all I'm asking.
I think it's a good question. I don't have an answer, but if I did, I'd probably encourage you to talk to your own.
So to
folks.
do it, I don't know if we want to reach out to them if, I know you need an answer, but I don't know what their vision of agriculture is. Not because of this case, but just in general as we go forward. If somebody's going to they don't pick the forestry, they don't pick conservation, but they pick agriculture, do we have to worry about this?
I guess I'd just say that the definition of agriculture under the statute is very broad.
Yeah,
So it allows a
I
wide
know.
variety of activities, and it does recognize agriculture or farm to mean a variety of different farm buildings, outbuildings, production facilities, and it includes, agritourism. So it really is pretty expansive. It can include wedding venues. It can include a really broad range of things. The town, in our conservation open space development, allows farming or agriculture as one of the uses of open space. So the town could narrow the definition of what it believes is acceptable under the definition of farm for the purpose of the conservation open space development. So that's an option that the town would have.
So we could say for open space, maybe there's a second set of rules,
Under the
Because it's
conservation
trying to
open space
preserve
development,
the
if we
land.
chose to, we could do that. We could further restrict, right now we're pretty broad. We just say farming, agriculture, and we haven't chosen to narrow that. Through the review process, you could also narrow it. So that's also possible.
If, for example, in this one, this is a fairly large lot. So you have 11 acres of open space, and you may have a specific calculation of what open space you need to meet the requirement. And you might say, as Jay says, in your review process, you could have said, all right, well, we want 5 acres, no agriculture, no nothing. We just want it reserved as open. We want that area. That's part of your review process, which you're entitled to. But I think you would probably also want to look at maybe a change in the ordinance if you wanted to head off everybody using open space for parking lots.
But you really got to think about if it's a field, or do you really want to limit, if in that case, what Morgan just said, 5 acres, you can't do nothing. If it's part of Adonis' old farm or Wilson Farm or the fields in front of my house or anything, do you want to restrict that to something that can't get farmed?
No, we want it farmed,
Well,
but I don't know if
so-
we want 5,000 cars a year in there, or does that
Well, but
defeat the
so-
purpose
But
of?
if you're going to farm it, you got to be able to sell the product.
I
to be able
agree.
to
That's what
farm
I'm
it.
saying. I don't know what the vision of the people who made this agricultural ordinance, I think
You know, to
it was
me,
intentioned, but I don't know if it left the door open for this
I
issue.
I think you need to look at each piece separately, but also if what your restrictions are going to be. If they're too restrictive, then are people going to go to that? Go to agriculture. I mean,
Well, you can do anything with the agriculture. It means the open space agriculture is what I'm.
If it's a component of a conservation lot subdivision and you've allowed lots to be smaller and more dense, as long as open space is provided, that may be a legitimate inquiry in that subdivision. What are you using that open space for? Because the intent was, we'll let you have more density if you give us some space that nobody can use. So I think that's a good inquiry on each time there's a conservation lot subdivision.
and depends if it's a wooded lot, that's different than an open field, I think.
So I think I'm concerned, I'm glad you can do commercial. I just wanted that clarified, or whoever is going to go in there.
So
But I don't want to defeat the purpose of open space. You built the homes on smaller lots. You donated this property for open space. And all of a sudden we're seeing maybe a lot of volume of, I'm not talking, I hope they're successful. I hope it's not 10,000 cars a year, but if it is, it is. But that's something I would look at in the future is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think in the future, it's a fair question to raise, but given the size of this, and one of the reasons we're here is everybody's looked at it, says, well, if I can't farm that back piece, those 2 back pieces, this is probably just not sufficient to go out there and farm. I need every inch I can get to farm. So that's one of the reasons we're here.
So I
Thank
want to
you.
make sure I understand what you're asking. So in 3A, which has the reservation of rights, the last clause,
Right.
provided that no such use shall be allowed within the portion of the property identified as proposed area of deed restriction. Right?
That is the key clause. That's right.
And that seems pretty clear on its face.
It does, and when you look at the plan, as I say, those dots, there's no legend on the plan, which is sort of one of the problems here. But those dots, in my fair reading of the plan, says anything in the dots, not the wetland demarcation, but the dots, is a proposed area of deed restriction. And so that means everything east of the railroad, including the highlighted portions, may not be used for anything, because this reserve right doesn't apply to that. It says, provided, however, no such use shall be allowed within the portion of the property identified as that. So what I'm suggesting is it should say proposed area of the deed restriction, which is wetland. Because everything else, the non-wetland has been farmed forever.
Right, but the proposed area of deed restriction that's that center strip, right? That's what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
if you turn to page 1.
Yeah.
There's a highlight that says proposed area of deed restriction. And if you look, it's all the gray area. I would call gray and dotted on the plan. And then there's the outline of the wetlands, and there are the little wetland flags on that piece. And so the intent was everything in the wetland doesn't get touched, but you can continue to farm the area that's not in the wetland. The proposed area deed restriction suggests that the dots on this plan would encompass those areas. In other words, you cannot farm in those areas by this document. So my suggestion is I'm going to try to amend it to say identified as proposed area of deed restriction, accepting those areas not in the wetland. So it's clear what we're talking about. The wetlands can't be farmed or used for any reserved rights, but the areas which are not in the wetlands can be. And that would seem to be the intent in the way it was drawn up. I mean, they showed the setbacks. There was a disconnect between the identification of the area of deed restriction and what's described in the restrictive covenants.
And it really comes down to the only thing we want to do is be able to farm what's always been farmed. That's it.
And is that the section highlighted here?
Yeah, it's
And
the
the
upper
one-
one as well.
And the top one by your top of your.
If you, Jay,
Sorry.
can you call up the picture of
this,
the
yeah.
land?
Yep.
Don't
This
think
one and this
that's
piece.
on.
Okay.
This piece and this piece is the only thing, but we don't touch this.
But-
And then when you look at this, that shows that says the same thing, but it goes from here to here. So, and then we show the setbacks in here. So
All right.
that's why. It's-
But not in that strip, the what was it, the rail?
That's already exempt. That's already
This is-
reserved.
That's
Yeah.
reserved.
I mean,
That's reserved.
until you take it, if somebody plants corn in it, does it matter?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's a reserved easement in there as well.
And it,
Yeah.
when you get, that would probably be farmed right now until
Yeah.
you need it.
Okay.
It can be farmed today, though, right? You're saying this was introduced because of the
It could be
wording.
farmed within the railroad. That's
Okay,
correct.
so today it's legal, what they're
That's
doing.
correct.
Okay, gotcha.
This section that you just pointed to, is that being farmed now?
Yes, it has
All of
been,
it's being farmed.
it's been farmed forever.
Wait, do you have a picture of?
Okay.
Like an aerial?
Yeah, an aerial
drone.
picture. I think that worked well for the Concom and.
Yeah.
I can
It's
try.
been farmed forever. So we only want to farm what's always been farmed.
Okay.
That's it.
All right.
And I just didn't, Morgan did the document. I didn't catch it.
Mhm.
We just missed it.
Yeah, as I say, it was between the engineer and myself. I'd seen a plan. I thought I knew what the area being proposed was, and then the final plan has the dots all the way through.
Do you have yeah, you can share if you can share it.
I tried to email it, but it wouldn't let me do this.
I don't want the whole screen to watch me search, so I'll have to disconnect it.
I missed that one.
So, just for this is the area which is
Yep.
identified. And so as you come back from the road, you can see where the farm patches are.
Yep.
Here.
Yep.
This is the right of way. I
Okay.
mean, this is the power lines.
Yep.
And then the old railroad track doesn't show. So
Yep.
you have to look at this piece and this piece, and this is the wetland brook in here.
Okay.
So if you match it to this.
Yep.
You can.
Yep.
I think if I put it this way, it matches up perfectly.
Yep.
You can see that's always been farmed right in here.
Yep.
This is
Yep.
this is the corner we're talking about,
Okay.
right there.
Yep.
And then that is that right there.
Yep.
That's what's been farmed. And that power line is the power line. Goes up
That's
here.
here.
That's the power line, right?
So what do you don't see all of this then?
You don't see all of that,
Yeah, yeah.
but we're not going back there. That's
Okay.
never been farmed. You can't go
Okay.
back there. So it's
All right.
that
Yep.
and that we're
Okay.
talking about. These two areas have been historically farmed.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else needs to look at it.
Do you need it wrong?
The 2015 aerial photo.
So the two areas are here
Mhm.
and here. If you look at your plan, you can see that and that, right there, right there. You notice there's a jog right here, there's a jog right here.
Yeah.
And then the power line is up in here.
Okay.
So we're talking about these two areas, that's all wet, this area here. You can see that historically, there's that piece clearly. in the EDC. So we're asking to allow the extension within the areas traditionally. Thank you.
So I'm assuming at some point you'd come back to us as the plans develop for
Any
any
structure,
structure you'd have to
yeah,
come back.
if the barn is gonna go up there, it has to come back
Yeah.
here by those covenants. It has to come back
And-
and you'll take a look at it and tell us what you think.
And that would include indications of parking for
Any use,
For
yeah.
Anything.
any,
Yeah, I think if it was strictly grown as a strawberry field, it's not required under the ordinance to come back. But
okay,
if you put a structure up there, it is required to come back.
Yep.
So. if you-
any structure.
Yeah, any structure.
Yeah.
Any structure.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So is what you're asking tonight is about get this clarification of where you could actually plant to see if this would be a feasible site for further development, like a winery. If we talked about that, is that?
It's for any use.
Yeah.
Anybody who's looked at it.
But you
has
want to
had
look
this-
at it and say, can we
Can we use it
actually
or
use
can't
that
we
for
use it?
agricultural
That
purposes?
is correct.
And we
And-
have 3 different people that are looking at it with 3 different farm uses.
Okay,
And
Yep.
that question has come up, so.
right, because it would obviously affect the feasibility of
Yep.
it.
And as I said, if you vote, you can actually read whatever the motion of the Conservation Commission and use that if you want to, because I think I would have to go back to the governing body of the town of Litchfield and ask for an amendment, ask if they will agree to an amendment. And I'm sure the first thing they're going to say is, did you go to the Conservation Commission? Did you go to the planning board? Did they agree that that's what it should be?
So is it obviously, I assume you're going to draft language that would sort of in the reserved rights section, basically to correct whatever you wanted it to say in terms of the proposed area of deed restrictions.
Yes.
Okay. And that would be reviewed, I assume, by town council.
Town council,
And
yeah.
then
Do
we would
the
go through
same
that
process. It would go to Jay, and
Okay.
then the town council, and then, of course, I have to convince the board of selectmen that they want to do this, because they're the body that holds the enforcement power.
But you don't have language tonight.
I do not, because I wanted to make sure that you all understood the concept, and as I say, if you want to adopt the vote of the Conservation Commission, my next step would be to draft language, get it to Jay.
Okay.
If you want us to come back here with the language, we'd be happy to do that at your next meeting. Jay and I'll have that, and we'll get it back here.
Can I ask again? I'm sorry, what the language of the Conservation Commission?
Certainly.
Oh,
So the commission voted 6-0-1 to support the agricultural activities within the property where farming has historically occurred in highlighted areas on the property. Please see the map from Brookfield Acres, a highlighted portion of the property in question.
That would, except for that strip of land, right, where the rail
That's
trail
correct.
was.
Yep,
Right.
the
That's
highlighted portions are not
Yeah.
the
okay.
rail.
That's not.
Everything, it's just east of it, just that.
All right, I understand.
And if you want to add to that, no structure can be placed, any structure has to be placed west of the railroad easement is fine.
Okay.
Okay, and that takes care, and I prefer you do that. if you
Okay.
would, because then that makes it clear cut. Whoever comes in and buys it, they know they have to be west of the.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have anything else that they want to ask?
I think it makes sense. The I mean, our town ordinances don't, every definition of designated open space includes agricultural use. So I don't see how we could limit it any further than that definition without updating the ordinances at a later time, but, so I think it makes sense. It looks almost like an oversight, in the original plan.
And I think obviously historically it's been farmed, so.
Yep.
It makes sense. Remain that way. Okay. So what would the board like to, oh, well, actually, before I even do that, before I even go back, I'm just going to open it up to public comment. Is there any members of the public here this evening who wish to comment on this? Have any questions? Give you an opportunity. Okay. Well, hearing none, I'll close public input, bring it back to the board. But what would the board like to do? You want to make a motion? That this be, that this proposed area of deed restriction be part historically as that has been farmed originally, that it be made for agricultural.
I'll make a motion to use the same language as the Conservation Commission
Okay.
and adding restricting the structure of building
West.
to west of the railroad.
Second.
All right. Motion by Kate, second by James. Do I have a discussion? All right. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, abstained. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Next item of business this evening is the work session on zoning permitted uses. So we have our workshop this evening. And I guess I'll ask, so you guys want to introduce yourself again, and then we'll have the people in the room want to introduce themselves as well. This is sort of a, I want to make this as engaging as possible. And this is sort of a workshop part of it, the program. So this is an opportunity, sort of an informal opportunity for you guys to sort of talk about things and ideas and so forth. So please feel free to join in. Obviously, we have Attorney Hollis with us, Mr. Charbonneau, Jim Petropoulos. Good evening. I also have here this evening Matt Lepore, who's the chair of the Conservation Commission. And I do see Jason Brennan, a member also of the Conservation Commission. Hello, Jason. And anybody else want to introduce themselves this evening?
Don't forget Emily Coughlin, who's
Okay.
an intern, and she's from Litchfield, New Hampshire.
Okay, good evening, welcome. And John Noseworthy, you're here? Okay, very good. Awesome, okay. So I guess I'll let you, Mr. Charbonneau, or Attorney Hollis, if you want to, or Jim, if you want to start us in on the presentation, go right ahead. This is you have the floor.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. This will be highly informal. For the record, my name is Jim Petropoulos. I'm a civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, doing business at 3 Congress Street in Nashua, New Hampshire, and I do represent Rick Charbonneau, Continental Paving's interests, land interests here in town. And we're really here just to have a conversation about the Northern Commercial District here in town. We did put together a brief PowerPoint presentation, and my old friend Jay is going to man the board for me, so I appreciate him doing that.
And I'm just going to apologize in advance. This is a PDF, not our PowerPoint, so it won't click as pretty.
So,
No, perfect.
so as a team, we have spent some time, and obviously Rick and Continental Paving owns land that we'll talk about in the Northern Commercial District. And we've had an opportunity over the past year or so at Rick's behest to look at his properties with a goal towards the future. And I think Rick's building experience here in town speaks for itself, from Callaway Court to Hidden Creek and his developments. And he's always had Litchfield's interest at heart. And he wanted us to look at his land and try to come up with some ideas about master planning. And as we did, we found the northern commercial zone, frankly, a bit waning in terms of its definitions, in terms of its allowed uses. There were a number of things there that we just felt would inhibit good development in the future. And in talking about it with our team, we approached Jay and said, geez, if we do have an opportunity before the planning board, maybe we can come in and share some of our thoughts about the northern commercial zone. As an overview, we found a number of uses that are currently allowed is to be, unfeasible or unsustainable for development in that particular zone. The code was written, I believe, in 1989, which, believe it or not, is over 30 years old, and it could use a shot in the arm. There's other uses and better uses, I think, that could be added to the zone. Next slide. We did take a look at the zone, and of course, your map, Jay, if you want to flip it through, there you go. This map is nothing more than your zoning map. It's a wonderful map if you look at it. Your northern tip and your southern edge clearly show your commercial zones, your commercial industrial zones. And the main body of your property, of course, is residential, right in the heart of the development. Our focus is at the top of the page, the northern commercial zone, which is a fairly independent zone. It does have a little bit of the multi-family overlay district as part of the northern commercial area. Next slide, figure 2. So we put it in an aerial map. And again, these are lands that I know you're familiar with. You can see the Charles Bancroft Highway is that main spine that runs north. You can see Albuquerque tying into it. The northern commercial district is about 311 acres in terms of total area. We did a little pie chart on the right here to give you a sense of what that breakdown was. About half, 48%, is residential. Most likely homes, single-family homes that had existed really prior to the creation of the northern commercial zone. Commercial space, 20%. Obviously, Mel's being 50 acres is the main property owner there on the commercial side. Various uses, industrial, conservation, churches, and then the undeveloped land, 22% of the property in that zone is undeveloped. And as you can see on the next slide, we've kind of highlighted in a beige color those larger tracts that are undeveloped. If my PowerPoint, for some reason, they don't work on TV screens, but if it did, I would point out the Thoreau property to the north, the Colby properties just below it, and the remaining properties are Charbonneau Continental properties there, really at the intersection of Morgan, Albuquerque, and Charles Bancroft, and right there where the cursor is.
And actually, we own or have under agreement from the power lines down to Romano's.
Yeah.
So there's one lot where the trash company is the only lot that I don't either own or have under agreement.
Yep.
So
If
everything.
you look at the next slide, it kind of shows Charbonneau's property in blue. And I think there's that one lot, Rick, you
Yeah.
can see it.
Yep,
So
okay.
from the power line down to Albuquerque and then even to Morgan, you can see it's a fairly sizable area. Totals about 50 acres of unbuildable land, 16% of the zone. Of the 12 properties that are undeveloped, Charbonneau's have 7 of them, Continental Paving. Our cursor says 89%. I don't think that's correct, Mr. Chairman. These properties, Rick has about 50% of the undeveloped land in the northern commercial zone. And that's as he's trying to formulate his vision for his property in the future. That's why we're taking a look at it. As we delved into the northern commercial zone, we found some concerns, of course. I'll talk a little bit in a minute about the limited number of uses available. little bit limited number of sustainable uses. But also just we highlighted a couple things. One of these on this particular page under 800.03 is commercial development needs to represent be compatible with a small New England village character. And again, with the town's agricultural history, which I agree with, the character of Litchfield is agriculture. It is the fields. We concur with that. But the New England village character is very subjective. And I think if commercial development is going to occur in the Northern Commercial District, we find that element being a little bit too difficult maybe to work with. And I just wanted to point that out, as we're going to point out a few things here tonight. Permitted use, next table. We found here that majority of the uses are okay, but some are not sustainable. Indoor theaters, for example. Sure, we'd like the opportunity, but the likelihood of doing an indoor theater in the northern commercial part of Litchfield is not likely. We think that a number of the uses, the type and character of North Litchfield don't have enough traffic or have enough numbers. For instance, banks, professional offices, things like that are just, I don't think you're going to find anybody to build an office building in the Northern Commercial District, because I think they would have trouble over time with the leasing or occupying that building.
And I did get one approved back
Yeah, right.
15 years ago,
Yeah.
10 or 15 years ago, out in the field when you drive in Albuquerque on the right. I have a 65,000 square foot office building approved, got it approved, but there was never any takers, and it's
Nobody's ever knocked on your door. Yeah.
no.
Right. One use we found interesting, the mixed use element number N. It reads a little funny. I think the intent was to have businesses that were allowed in the zone to be able to have a live work environment, which we like that idea, but it puts the priority on the business and with a lesser priority on the home. Whereas we're thinking that there would be interest for a plumbing or a roofing contractor or a tradesman to build a home in the zone and then have a barn or an annex to his house to be able to run his business out of. So it's a little flipped, and we're looking for that type of flexibility in this particular zone. Additional uses to consider. Emily tracked down some towns, I think, comparable to Litchfield, some rural towns here in New Hampshire. Hollis is an example. We looked at some codes in Bedford and in other communities. Things that may fall under the uses with a broad interpretation by zoning, but we do think that the list of uses could be a little bit more detailed. I'll just cite read a few. You can read them off the screen. Drugstores, fitness centers, karate, dance studios. We think in a bedroom community like Litchfield predominantly that services for people that have to travel or bring their kids to either lessons or dance or something in either Manchester or Nashua, would like the opportunity maybe in the Northern Commercial District to have something like that. I put down car washes. We put down a smaller warehouse distribution with an asterisk. I'll talk about that in a second. Restaurants, live work environments, which we just talked about, multifamily residential, elderly, recreational sports, professional licensed services, plumbing, heating, electric, things we just talked about. So it just became apparent to us that the code needs a shot in the arm with a few more uses. We did start a couple of these as being subject to regulation. We know you have the Northern Commercial District and the Southern Commercial District for a reason. Those are the areas that you've targeted for commercial use, and they're good areas, no question about it. But we think that a little bit more flexibility with housing might also be a good idea. And with regulation, I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but maybe a a conditional use process here before the planning board, where if we wanted to do a residential use in the northern commercial zone, it would be subject to your approval and with certain conditions. And I listed a few as we progress. We did go back in the master plan. We wanted to make sure we didn't come in here and suggest things that might not be consistent with the vision. The master plan looks like it has concerns about big box commercial and retail development. I would say, yeah, I agree. The next slide, Jay. Our company's had a great fortune of being involved in quite a bit of large box commercial industrial development, FW Web, FedEx facilities, new Bell Advance facilities a couple miles up the road in Londonderry. We've been involved representing Amazon. We've been involved with large distribution facilities in Connecticut. I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, that what those clients are looking for, and we're talking 250 to 750,000 square foot buildings, Litchfield doesn't have the infrastructure for that. They don't have the access to highways. They don't have sanitary sewer, which is critical for these companies. So sure, there's a concern about big boxes. You've got a wonderful town. It would be out of scale with the town. But if there's a fear that, there's going to be this monster use that could go at the corner of Albuquerque and Charles Bancroft Highway on Continental's land, the infrastructure is not there to support those uses. Same with retail. Master plan excerpts, it speaks highly of good development, community character. As I said at the onset, I think Rick's got a history here in town of doing good development, and that's same with Morgan, and that's what we like to try to represent, our good development, and that's what Rick wants to do in the future with those 40 plus acres of land. Next slide, I'm wrapping up here. It does speak to the support for multifamily housing and diversity of housing throughout. Again, back to the zoning map, you see that there's some small areas of the multifamily overlay district. Rick's project, Callaway Court, is a project Morgan and I were involved with. I think came off fantastic. But there really aren't that many pieces of property in those two zones to support multifamily. To be able to have that as a conditional use in the northern commercial zone, I think also provides some flexibility to the property owner. Lastly, we just summed it up by thinking that the northern commercial district, needs a shot in the arm. As I said, it's a little bit of out of date, and it needs, we think, some broader definitions. The nature and character of North Litchfield is really not going to attract the big box distribution and retailers. We'd like to recommend that we continue discussions about possibly amending the northern commercial zoning ordinance to include some of the uses we've talked about tonight. The conditional use process is something that I think could be included in that. And that would give the planning board authority as a project came in, let's say it's a 10-acre tract that wanted to do a mixed use project with some commercial and some multis. It would give this board the ability to approve that with looking at things such as not endangering public health, safety, and welfare, buffering, traffic, all the elements that would need to be met in order to obtain an approval. So again, this is just an informal discussion. I think Morgan just wants to make a couple comments before we try to answer any questions. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yeah, I think briefly, it might be relevant to the situation to sort of say, how did we come to get here? My client owned a parcel immediately opposite Mel's, which shown on that plan. And at the time, he talked to me about the highest and best use, as most property owners would, and he looked at what the zoning allowed and said none of those uses are the highest and best use for First of all, they encourage commercial, they encourage strip development, they encourage certain limited uses in a commercial district. And it's right opposite the busiest commercial activity in this town. So whatever you put in there that's allowed, you're going to have these competing traffic patterns where the prime traffic is about the same time. So he looked at it as, I live in this town and that's not good for this town. Now that's his viewpoint. He'll speak to that. So the process to do that is you go to the zoning board and ask for relief from the ordinance for any use that's not in your permitted uses. And as you know, as Jim outlined, there's a laundry list of permitted uses, but very few of them are real practical and probably very unlikely to be developed. So you should know that in this town, there have been a series of variance applications for uses not permitted in that district, but that fit within the town. Some of them have been approved and some of them are denied. We went to the zoning board. Frankly, the zoning board liked it. They said, we like the use, but it's not our job to rezone. So if you want to change the ordinance, go back and change the ordinance. They didn't exactly say that, but that's my interpretation of the response. It was denied, but it was denied with nice comments about they liked the use. So Rick and I sat down and talked about how do you get from where we are to what ought to be a fair use here rather than putting a strip center, a retail shopping center. And the answer is we have to change the zoning. And you can change the zoning by your own petition, and that gets voted on at town meeting. You can change it by a petition brought by the planning board, and that gets voted at town meeting in the spring. And so we talked about coming in with our own private petition, and Rick's response to that really was that he felt it ought to be done the simple answer is just bring the overlay down. The overlay now covers just the very tip of the northern commercial, and you could just drag that overlay down to our property and make the rest of the zone overlaid with multifamily housing, and so be it. But that's really not what he wanted to do. He said, what I want to task you and Jim with is look at the ordinance. This is best for the town. Let's have an open discussion. Well, coincidentally, you all began the discussion about it at the same time. What's going on in the commercial district? How do we avoid having big boxes come in? So we were tasked to come up here and we put our heads together and then met with Jay and we're hoping that as you deliberate, you will think about potential amendments to the ordinance, not just in the terms of are we restricting it enough to keep out our biggest fear, but now's a good time to take a good look at it. You have some time. These ordinances have to be amended. The amendment has to come up by December and then get voted on by January and then put before the voters in March. So we're hoping that some of our suggestions will be food for your thought and your deliberations. We're happy to answer any questions.
And if you look at the convenience store, look how long that's been empty. And to build anything like a strip mall, that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. There's just not enough traffic. It's pretty tough to go build something like that. So we need to, if we're going to build anything, we need to build something that has multiple uses or more uses. Some housing involved with it, maybe a small development with a restaurant, but we need some business to come into town to sustain a restaurant. I used to keep Hidden Creek open in the winter. Now they cost me more money than it was worth, because no one comes. If I don't have my golfers, I don't have anybody. And, I'll tell you that when Continental Paving shuts down, the local stores, whether it's 7-Eleven on 102 or whatever, when my employees stop coming in for the winter, they're thankful when we come back to work. They tell my brother and myself all the time, glad you guys are back to work. We're back, we make a profit again because your people are stopping in. So we need to figure a way to get people back in. I thought it was great that Webb was going to come, but I guess they've gone away and picked another site. I guess that's happened. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe that to be the case. So because they needed a variance and things that they had to go through to get there. So we need to try to open up the zoning a little bit to get someone like that and let them in. And right now, to get a variance is really tough because when you get to that number 5, can it be used for what it's zoned for? And you can, but it's a strip mall. The strip mall, you know, it was a perfect place, you know. Back when, what's the other place there? TLC or L? What's the,
Yeah,
you know, the car place.
yeah.
I mean, they got a variance because the zoning board got creative and they got it. So,
Mhm.
which was good. I mean, we don't even know they exist out there,
Right.
you know? So that lot out there, or the lots that aren't right up against 3A, perfect spot. Let's get a building like that. Let's get some people. Because then we may be able to build that little strip mall to put a restaurant in if we have people working in town. So when we don't have anybody working in town, it's tough. And that's what we need to try to do if we're gonna get anything. And, you know, on the piece on Albuquerque where I got the 65,000 square foot, when we did Hidden Creek and got that all approved, you know, I also had some mini warehousing in there, but I didn't build it because, as I told you before, I don't care for it. I don't like the looks of it. And I really didn't want that when we're driving down Albuquerque to look at it. I'd rather wait and have a project that I think looks nice, you know. I've tried with a few different grocery chains and there's just not enough traffic, not enough people, you know, to get something in. So it's really difficult to come up with something that you can build. So I think it would be good for the town to open it up to see what we get, you know, to try to get some of that stuff. And, you know, and it is very difficult. I mean, having research and development, it's not going to happen because we don't have sewer, whether it's a north end or south end. Without sewer, you know, and over the years, I've donated, I want to say probably 150,000 at different times to try to get a group to approve, to look into sewer with Manchester or Nash or whatever. The money got spent, but nothing ever came of it. You know, because I really believe without that,
Yeah.
We have gas, we have power, we just don't have sewer.
So, yeah.
We have
Water
water,
now.
you know, we have plenty of water because we're hooked into Manchester. So it's all there but the sewer. If we got sewer, then we could get something. But again, we don't have the road network either. So we're not going to get a big off, you know, someone to come in like a BAE because you don't have the traffic. We don't have the road network to do it. And the same thing in the southern end. Until there's a connection to 102, it's not going to get developed. I mean, you're not going to get a good commercial use or anything like that. And I think we need to look at other agricultural uses that can come in. The family farms, before we know it, aren't going to be the family farms that we know today. And I really believe that. And I don't know how you people feel about it, but I can tell you, I hope we just don't see solar farms out on all our farmland. You know, I just hope, I pray that at least as long as I'm breathing, it's like that. Just, I mean, that kind of energy is good, but I don't know. They just don't look so good to me.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my personal opinion.
Well, as an outsider, the character of the town are the fields and the agricultural.
Yeah.
And the solar field doesn't reflect that.
And a lot of them, I mean, you know, the most of the farmland, like the McQuestion farm, probably almost all of the McQuestion farm is in floodplain.
Sure.
So chances, I mean, could you put a solar field in there? Probably, maybe, because so if they get flooded,
I
I
don't know
guess.
if
it'd pick 'em up.
anybody would finance that.
Yeah, but whatever. I mean, but you're not going to change the floodplain. So, you know, that's in some of the Wilson farms the same way. Like a third or half of what past Conaway is when we built that was in floodplain, and we could build the golf course when we built it because we maintained the same amount of floodplain within the golf course. So that's how we were able to do it. So those are things we have to look at. I guess some input from the planning, but what your visions are, what you guys would like to see as we develop.
Right. No, I think it's definitely for Litchfield. I think we're a unique community, the way we're shaped, and how we grow, and we have grown over the time, and certainly what that future is going to look like. I really don't. I mean, it's interesting. I think it's, like I said, I think it's a challenge, and I certainly think it's how we want to sort of keep our rural character, but at the same time, maybe adapt in some way. It is interesting. I've always thought that, Litchfield, I think, is another unique thing about Litchfield too, is the fact that we are fortunate to have the agriculture, the forest, the residential, and some of the commercial. So those things, that we still have quite a bit of the agricultural, and we certainly have quite a bit of the forest land and the wetlands, and in Litchfield, and protection of that. So I think that's what makes us, I think, a little bit. I think people are attracted to that too, and I think that's what brings them here and interests them.
I was on a committee back with Jay was on at the time when we did this 30 years ago, and we did it to have the southern end of town because we thought the circumferential highway was coming, and we did the north end of town the way we did it. So we left everything in the middle alone, the way it is, and that's why we did it back then. And we picked uses back then that we have today, but nothing ever got built from it. But at the time we thought it was the best thing to do, and not much got built in the south end either.
Well, times change. I mean, e-commerce at a much larger scale, we do a lot of warehouse distribution. I mean, e-commerce, I don't need to say, changes how we all live. E-commerce, look at the airport, how the airport was developed. They thought the airport was going to be developed with 50 buildings for development. Brick built 4. There's the big boxes, distribution. And so things change, and zoning needs to change with it. I think from my perspective as an engineer, that would look to, I call it the Bible, look to the zoning ordinances to tell us what can and can't be done. Flexibility is a key word. And you want your protection, Mr. Chairman, for your rural, and you can get that with buffering. You can get that with densities. You can get that. We're not here pushing 40 units to an acre because the land can't support that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the concern is that if you open the floodgates, you have to be able to say, we don't want to become this. We don't want to become Methuen. No disparaging Methuen, but I mean, we all know what those, that's not what this town is. And frankly, I mean, I think many of us were sort of very concerned about this big distribution center that was going to be built in Hudson. I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think it belongs there. I think it's probably going to end up being more of a blight than anything that's going to enhance the quality of life in Hudson or Litchfield. So how do we say, yeah, sure, some of these things that you list, additional uses, that makes sense. But I don't want to open it up so that someone can say, well, now we have this idea and, it could become a reality. I think the town should define itself and say, this is not, 3A is not a place to put a big commercial pharmacy. It just, in my opinion, it doesn't belong there. Or a big supermarket, or a big, but there may be other things in here that make sense, a florist, or or more housing opportunities. I mean, clearly, we talked here about the problem with affordable housing in this area. but certainly in Litchfield, I don't know what the median price of a house is in Litchfield, but it's pretty high.
Well, but that's what it comes down to. Do you want more commercial, or do you want to stay as housing, with some
Right.
kind of mixed use?
Right.
And then nothing very big, but at least you have an opportunity for housing to, so you can build something. Housing projects look nice. You can make them look really nice.
Right. Yeah, no, so commercial meaning, certain kinds of commercial, that fit in to the character of the town. I mean, what's the phrase about an old New England town or something? That you come into the town and you say, all right, this place is different. This is not Manchester. This is not Nashua. This is not even Hudson, that we have a special character. And so how do you preserve that and without like saying opening the floodgates? And so what we say now is like this would never happen, right? We'd never be able to build these kinds of things. But in 10 years, 20 years from now, it could be very different. And we could have a town, 3A could be unrecognizable from what it is now.
I mean, to me, I'd rather see, if you're going to add housing and some workforce housing, it's either like a condo type or a townhouse type. Personally, in my own opinion, I hate those big buildings that are 50 units in an apartment building, or something that where the Friary is in Hudson. They just built those new.
Wow,
Ugly.
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 Those things are
Terrible.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know if you could build anything uglier than those.
Right.
I
don't think you could. I don't think you could.
So.
How do you really feel about it?
Well, you have to look at them. I mean, they're pretty bad. So, we need to have something that whatever, when you lighten it up, someone's going to build something that looks, townhouse or something that's going to look good, that fits the area.
You can have that New England feel on the main road and then have other companies in the back.
Right.
And this is serious. I've been reading every Warren article since 1985.
Yeah.
Your name's there. Your name is there. Because I wanted to see why they were developed. And we're going to give all this out. And I wanted to see what the town wanted. And I wanted to see who leadership was at the time and go and talk to people. And I did. And this is a huge responsibility. And it's not just the planning board. It's the town.
Yeah.
And we need to maybe not do this all in one big shot. Maybe we take one at a time. I don't know. But this is a lot of responsibility for anybody. And you've already felt it. You have as well. But I hope you come to these workshops. We definitely need it. I would say a survey to the northern part of town people just to see their input as well. I think it should be brought in and have them part of this workshop as well. So great ideas. We knew it was stale. We were looking at this and we're going. Some things were really good and some things we've just matured, right?
All the
in
experience that
time.
I've had in trying to do these things, the toughest part is to get anybody to show up. Unless you make it controversial and it sounds real bad, it's the only way they come. And it's very difficult. I mean, we never got anybody any more than we have right here to come up with all this stuff.
It's usually a reactionary thing
Right.
more than it is a
It is.
proactive thing. Like,
It's difficult. I mean,
yeah.
most people say, I just want to leave the town the way it is.
Yeah.
And as soon as you cut a tree, why are they cutting the trees? I want it to stay forested forever.
But we can go whether you want to do small changes, because something has to be done. Doing nothing, it's an option, but I don't think it's a good one. Different scenarios, maybe smaller steps for people, or instead of something so radical. I think would probably be better at the voting office, because when we get up there at warrant article time, we have to say what it is. We don't want them exploding at that point, because but you could explain a small change to them instead.
For example, we had a couple of variance applications that we talked about tonight. The one distribution center, which is appropriate size and appropriate location. It's not on the road. It's up there in the northern commercial, and it's in there, and it probably doesn't meet your current zoning, but it was brought in there and deemed to be a reasonably acceptable use by not only the zoning board, but by you. But that's something that could be spelled out in the ordinance, so people don't have to go to the zoning board and convince the zoning board why to do it. Same thing with residential, multifamily. Again, application to the zoning board, in this case, it wasn't successful. But if the zoning board saw that the planning board thought it was okay, and the planning board put it under a conditional use permit, so that it came back to the planning board, then you've kind of opened the doors a little bit. You've said, this is what we feel about it, rather than saying, oh yeah, anywhere you want to put it in the northern commercial is okay. And there might be some of these other uses that you could say, hey, you know what? We think these might be good uses, but you've got to come back here and meet the criteria of the conditional use permit. You've got to convince us that it's not going to, a typical conditional use criteria is, it's not aesthetically unpleasing. There's no other way to put it, but that's how the planning boards view it is. That's not going to be offensive when people look at it. And there are a lot of ways to restrict it. You got to make sure you've got the proper drainage, but also the appearance. As Rick says, you don't want a 5-story multifamily housing. It's just not in the character. But what he constructed in terms of townhouse, 6 units, 8 units in a building is probably, and it's interesting because in your overlay district, there's a requirement that they have to be in keeping with the character of this town. And Rick actually went out and found an architect for that project and designed the look and appearance that it wouldn't be something you're not comfortable with. So those kind of things can be baked into any ordinance, any of these approved uses. You could say, well, you know what, we like them, but we're not sure what we're going to see. So we might want to do conditional use and make some of the restrictions like we already have in the southern or the northern overlay district. So that's just my comments as a lawyer that I see. It's much more workable than having to go in. You go to the zoning board, they're not equipped for it. They're not there for that purpose. They're not really there to talk about. All they get is a plan that says, this is what we think it's going to be, but we don't know until we go to the planning board. And then you go to the planning board and everything changes. Go back to the zoning board. Well, that really wasn't what we had in mind. So it's probably much more effective. And I see in this day and age, there's so many more mixed use options going on that zoning did not anticipate. There haven't been changes to zoning ordinances in years. So everybody wants mixed use. They want residential near workplace situations. They want to have jobs so that people don't have to drive all the way through town just to go to work. And the ordinances haven't accommodated them. So you end up with going to the zoning board, getting one thing, and then to the planning board, and then back to the zoning board. And it really belongs in a conditional use for the planning board to approve, not for the zoning. Zoning board sits as a quasi-judicial capacity. You all sit as a planning body for this town. So those are, we hope you'll consider those, and what we'll try to do is, come back again and help you out as the time approaches.
Members of the audience, I didn't know if people wanted to add anything.
Can I say something
Yeah,
real
go
quick?
ahead.
Yeah. I would definitely agree that we need more affordable housing in town, but what I don't want to do is extend the residential zone into those commercial areas, purely residential, because I think there's an argument to be made that a big reason why a lot of that is undeveloped is because of the restrictions on the commercial use. If it was all zoned as residential, that would have all been houses forever ago. So I'd like to hear more about mixed use that you would find feasible, because we know that the retail stores are not doing so well. We can't put more stores under apartments or anything. But if there's other ways to build more affordable housing while also including that tax offset that commercial brings in, I think we need to look at that for sure.
How about if I have Jim come up with a plan, so we take the piece on Albuquerque and we just come up with a plan showing what
Example.
on that acreage, what we think we could build on that acreage with a mixed use, maybe, if the other gas station doesn't get built, then it might be a good thing to put the gas station on the corner there. I mean, maybe you're for it, maybe you're against, I don't know, or someplace in but you guys have to tell me. I don't know. I don't, it doesn't, I don't really want to build a gas station, but I'm just throwing, but those are things that you're going to be able to occupy. I mean, I'm not,
I know. I understand.
I don't know if the other gas station is going to get built or not. That's still up in the air. So, but there's, if something, I mean, but we can look at that and come up with a plan and just a sketch saying this is what we think it could be out here. There's going to be housing in it, maybe townhouses and things like that. Maybe we can get a gym or something, something in there.
Urgent care.
That's possible. I daycare.
Matt, did you want to add anything? Jason, I know you're members of the Conservation Commission. Anything you'd like to add? Discussion this evening?
I will.
Go ahead.
I think this is really interesting, and if you put your 1989 thinking cap on, and at that point in time, there was no internet. The trend was point of service going to the mall, big box stores. And maybe back in 1989, that's what the folks that developed this thought was going to come into town. But nowadays, you fast forward nowadays, I travel pre-COVID all over the United States for work, working with cities and municipal governments in the engineering industry. And down south, it's all mixed use. A combination of small businesses, condos, apartments, and I would even say in regards to residential, it's not only to me affordable housing, it's different types of housing because there's people, and I'm getting up there myself, that may want to downsize, stay in town because we like it, but maybe get rid of the big colonial house with the yard that I have to maintain every single week, and maybe go down to a condo and still live in the community. So that the trends are different now, and I think the planning board has to kind of think of that a little bit. And the other thing, putting on the conservation hat, this tweaking things, shot in the arm, gives you the opportunity to connect neighborhoods that weren't connected before by using innovative ideas. So you got that Corning Road area that's completely, you could call that trolley crossing plus or something like that. You could use this opportunity to really intertwine the neighborhoods and help, spur pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic throughout the entire town.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a lot of different angles to kind of look at this. I can tell you this, you go down south, Richmond, Virginia, just west of Richmond, Virginia, farm fields all over the place. Many of them are battlefields. And companies have come in and really put down, I could see it going on at Wilson Farms, and basically plop a city that's a square mile, almost like Tuscan Village in Salem on steroids. And I don't think anything like that would ever happen here, but if you've ever gone in them, they're really cool. I mean, there's a mixture of service businesses, the electricians that just need office space. There's a trend now with COVID where people aren't going into the office, but people are renting office space. So all those types of things you see down south, I think they're going to eventually make their way up here at some point in time. But I think my whole point of my thing was you got to look at this through the 1989 lens and maybe tweak it for 2030. And that's the other thing. Don't think of it as of 2020, think of it what's going to happen in 2030 and make the adjustments for that.
And Jason doesn't have time to mow his own lawn because he's always mowing other lawns.
Yeah. Tell my wife that.
And the voters know what they need in town, right? They know. They're not going to be shocked when some of this stuff comes up at the warrant articles. They got to know we need some of this.
And everybody says at Dunkin' Donuts.
It's funny,
Run out of
it's,
gas a lot, Rick, so
it's-
there's a gas station close by, so I have to go to the airport.
it is, yeah, I was just gonna say that, sir. It's funny that services, those everyday services, bank, whether it's coffee or gas, they work. You know, they work.
Well, does anybody have anything else? Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming in tonight. I think this was a great discussion.
Thank you.
And I'm certain we're going to take all of your comments and information, and we're going to, put our heads together and see what we can come up with.
And if you want, just let us know. We're more than glad to
Absolutely.
come in.
Yeah.
Right, Jay, reach out to Morgan or Jay. You know, if you have a few discussions on your own, and be glad to do it. And I'll have Jim come up with a plan for that lot, just
That'd be good.
so you can get an
Be
idea.
interesting to see it.
Yeah.
Put our heads together and talk about it.
Okay, that'd be
All
great.
right?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank you
much.
very much.
She's not here.
No, Joan isn't here.
Joan,
Joan McKibben.
she'll do it from tape, or whatever they call it.
Thanks a lot.
Cable.
No, seriously, it's a Dunkin' Donuts.
All right. Next item of business, committee reports. Are there any reports of any committees? You want to start with you, Kim?
It's not a report. I'll just let you know the next meetings. On Monday, August 23rd, will be the next Board of Selectmen meeting at 6:30 PM here at the Town Hall. And on Wednesday, September 15th, will be the next full commissioner meeting at NRPC at 30 Temple Street in Nashua at 7 PM. And that's all I have.
Okay, great. The Lower Merrimack Local Bridge Advisory Committee is meeting next Thursday. It's the 26th Thursday? Yeah. I think so. So next Thursday, the 26th at 7 PM in Nashua. The Conservation Commission had a meeting at the beginning of the month, the beginning of August, the first Thursday in August. I did attend that meeting. Obviously, Charbonneau and Attorney Hollis were at that meeting regarding the declaration of covenants as we discussed this evening. Let's see. And the Capital Improvement Committee is sort of an enigma right now, only because trying to get a meeting going, but it seems as though it's I don't know. I've reached out to Troy, I reached out to Steve Weber, but it seems like it's just it's slow in the process. So, anyway. But I'm sure there'll be one coming up eventually, so we'll keep you posted on that. And that's all I have for committee reports. Approval of the August 3rd, 2021 minutes. Did anybody have an opportunity to look at those? Have any questions about them?
Thank you.
They look fine to me.
I didn't see anything. So I'll entertain a motion to approve them if no one sees any.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
I have a motion by Kim, second.
A second.
Second by Kate. Discussion? All those in favor of approval of the August 3rd, 2021 minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained, motion passes 5-0-0. Any other business? Jay, do you have anything this evening?
You just did want to mention that we do have an applicant who is kind of in a rush to move forward with the project. It's Wilson Farm has proposed some agricultural buildings that they want to build. There were some mix-ups internally, I think, due to changes in building department, which probably led to a delay in an application. So the question is, I think that the town is really working with them. So, hopefully they can move forward. But the question did come up as to whether or not we would be willing to entertain a special meeting. Right now, the first meeting that they could get on is September 7th. The only possibility of a special meeting would be the 31st. We have an extra Tuesday this month. So I throw it out there. It is a difference of a week, so it's not a tremendous difference. Would it make a difference to them? Yes. But again, it is a difference of a week. So I just throw that out there.
Why the
Or
rush?
what was the urgency?
They want to get the building up by the fall,
They want to get the building up by the fall.
right? Or in the fall, I should say.
One
I think by
building?
the fall. No, it's 3.
I'm not sure a week is going to make that much of a difference. but-
Yeah. It's certainly up to the board. I mean,
I mean, we couldn't do it next week. That would be, obviously would make more of a difference, but we don't have enough time to notify
Well, yeah,
others. So we can't go that fast.
So that would put it to what, the first Tuesday in September?
That's currently the next available. And that's when, of course, we would put them.
And that's
So
where they
that's
are right
that's
now.
the 7th. Yeah, that's currently the plan is the 7th.
What day were you talking about in September?
September 7th, Tuesday?
7th.
That's our next meeting.
All right,
next
if you
scheduled
want to
meeting.
go earlier than that, if we can.
31st.
So that's just the question.
31st.
But again, the earliest we could go is the 31st because we don't have time to notify for the 24th.
You said the delay was because of mix up with the building department, so it kind of sounds like the same reason for the last special meeting, where the town was having communication issues.
Because we had the turnover in the building department
Mm-hmm.
that we had, there were internal
Yeah,
communication
we had
challenges.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering if, since we did it for those previous applicants, if we should.
I mean, like I said, it's up to the board. If you guys, you don't have to. We can certainly keep it on for September. It's totally our call. I guess.
You know, I will say though, town staff, including the building inspector, is working with them.
And they'll have a site plan and all that?
Yes.
It won't be, we're just, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
there
don't wanna
already
come in
is a
just
site
for
plan.
a nod.
It's already been submitted, so we
Okay.
do have it.
I'm available, but if,
Yeah.
it depends on whether you all are.
Because I might be on vacation that week, so I don't know if I will be here. So that's the only thing. Unless Kate, you wanted to.
I don't mind
If you
doing
want
it.
to do it, that's perfectly acceptable.
Depends on other people's time constraints.
I'm okay with it.
You're okay with it?
Yeah, I'm
Everyone
okay.
else feels
Yeah.
okay? Jerry?
I don't think it's, a week is that much of a, so
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm available or not. I can't guarantee that I'll be here.
So we might not have a
Four.
quorum.
Yeah,
Unless Curtis were to come, then you probably might.
We still.
I don't want to tell them we'll have a meeting and then accidentally not have a quorum.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, then you get into that situation like the zoning board did. And that was a fiasco.
So if we can't guarantee a quorum tonight, then I don't think we should say we'll.
So maybe just keep them on
Okay.
September. They said something about the building, they want it up in the fall. Is that what they said?
That was my understanding. Yeah.
Well, I mean, technically, fall doesn't come till when, the 22nd of September? or something?
Whether it's meteorological or.
If they had, if they presented some compelling reason, but they want to build it in the fall, and it doesn't sound like a compelling reason to me.
Well, I think that they would have come sooner if the town's building department wasn't having the communication issues.
Right.
So it's kind of the same reason as the previous special meeting.
Well, I thought that last special meeting was because,
Yeah.
Well, the zoning
Board
zoning
wanted
chair
us to
wanted us
weigh
to
in
weigh
and-
in.
yeah.
That's right.
Right.
Because she wasn't gonna make a decision without our input. That was the basis of that.
Do we have anything on the agenda for the following Tuesday that we could just Oh,
For the
we
7th?
have a commitment with the town. It's always those 2 days. You know, how we have our certain meeting schedule. I don't know if we could,
Yeah, the 7th, I mean, the 7th is a regular
do we have anything on the agenda at this point?
for the 7th.
Not the 7th, yeah, the 7th, yes. But I'm
We-
just saying, do we
Other
want to
than
move the
this-
meeting up and then not, but if we don't have a quorum, we have a
oh,
problem.
Yeah, I mean, we very well may have, in addition to this, another application.
Okay.
On the 7th.
You know, that actually brings up, I mean, I think we need to start looking for alternates for the planning board. We're set at our regular membership, but I think we need to add to our group, just in case, you know, you never know what's gonna happen.
How many alternates is?
Um,
I don't
how
remember.
many are we
I'll say
allowed?
4.
Jay?
We've usually had at least 2, I think.
Two, I think, yeah. And, you know, and I don't know, I mean,
So
I guess
we're
I'm gonna
down.
have to, well, I don't know, does anyone know Joshua Smith, that talked to him at all, or no? he's,
I just saw him during baseball season. He was doing a lot of coaching, but I didn't know if he'd come back after that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
I
Maybe
know.
I'll reach out to him and see if he's still
Yeah,
there,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just to find out.
just to find out, just to
Been
make
long.
sure that,
It's been a while. since
yeah,
it's-
it has a
hasn't
little
been
bit.
a meeting, so.
And I just want to make sure that we,
We don't have any alternates right now, right?
No.
no, we kind of, yeah, everyone moved up to full member.
Curtis and I both, yeah.
Yeah.
That was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, last time we advertised, it was successful, so.
It was,
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember I saw it on the
Right.
sign outside.
So, all right, well, you know what, I'll reach out to Joan. I think maybe we'll do some, you know, advertising and put it out there on the sign. and
Yeah.
See if we can get some candidates.
Citizen involvement.
Are we gonna do another workshop on this? I can bring in all
Yeah,
those
I mean-
warrant articles, just a history, like,
Yeah, I mean,
on the wording as
I'm
well.
thinking if possible, I mean, if we could, you know, do a workshop every month.
Are we running against the clock if we need anything for warrant articles?
I mean, we definitely want to have ourselves together by December.
Or maybe just like
December.
small stuff for the hemorrhaging, you know, like if we do nothing, you know, there's some things we know we need to do just
Right.
quickly, not the big strategy 30 years out, but just,
Because I don't have all the dates in front of me, but typically the first public hearing is early January. So usually you vote to put it to public hearing in December.
so I researched, you know, why they were done, how the wording on the article was done, or if you added something into it later, a certain use, how that was done, so we don't have to reinvent wheel, you know, kind of thing. What the votes were, whether it was a squeaker or not, you know, or consistent, you know, no. But it's interesting to see, and maybe some of the ideas that they had might now work, you know. So I'll bring that in.
Do we want to plan for another workshop in September, or how do you, I mean?
I
do you
think
want-
we- I mean,
Are we gonna have, you know, do we think we'll have an opportunity during the third week or something?
That was kind of what I was thinking, the 21st? I think that would make sense.
Okay,
You know,
so maybe we can tentatively right now plan on that being.
yeah.
Are we opening it to the public as well? Or are we still doing our
It's a, well,
preliminary?
Yeah, public meeting. So yeah, we could have certainly,
And they see that on the agenda? And I'm sure when the agenda goes out.
yes.
How much time do they have on the agenda? Does it go out like a week before? Or? I
Pretty
have no
much goes
idea.
out when we get it, I think.
I don't know where they get. Sometimes it's online. Like
Yeah,
I've
this
seen it
one-
when I go to the town website.
Certain places, I think. they're like-
They do. We can also make it clearer. We can make the agenda clearer. Because now it just says work session on zoning permitted uses. If we want to be more specific about northern
Yeah.
commercial zone, we could say that. I mean, we could.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and there's no reason why we couldn't
Welcome.
put something out sooner.
Yeah.
To let people know.
So what would we want to get accomplished at the next workshop? We spent 2 kind of arbitrarily talking about it.
Yeah,
When do we get warrant article language, and what's our priority, which bits and pieces to change?
Well, we had the language before about restricting the distribution centers.
Yes,
Whether-
yeah, I think that's still on.
So if that's still on the table, that had the effect also of allowing them in the northern commercial zone. where they're not now. So that's whether we keep it in that context or in a different context, that's a piece that we could certainly look at. And I think we certainly could, talk to Mr. Charbonneau and Jim Petropoulos. They've offered to come in with a concept. Maybe that's worth looking at. I think I'd be interested in looking at some other mixed use concepts because there are other communities that do that. So maybe we, bring in some of those, take a look also. And, think about if we want that, what is it? What would the criteria be? If let's say, assuming it was a conditional use, what would the criteria be? I think it's also probably worth taking a look at, they'd put some suggestions of potential uses. I think looking at other thoughts that any of us might have of what makes sense.
Can we get a copy of that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'll send out the slides to everybody.
Thank you.
Dunkin' Donuts. Now they'll go down Albuquerque at 70 miles an hour to get to that Dunkin'.
So at least those are some thoughts we have. And, I don't know. I think to the extent too that it's possible, it'd be good to just, maybe individually just go out and take a look. Look at the land, look at the area, and think about, what really does make sense.
So I think that's probably the focus.
Yeah, I mean, and also we talked about undeveloped land, which is, not much more than a quarter of the area. But realistically, just because a house is a house today doesn't mean it would be a house in a commercial zone, a few years from now. And also some of the developed uses could change, especially some of the ones that are low intensity and are on very large lots.
Mhm.
All right.
And then at any point, I'd be happy to start looking at language. If we feel like we're ready to come up with some drafts, then.
I think,
Okay,
I
so,
guess
yeah.
next workshop would be, these are the ones we're gonna look at updating, like these specific sections, and then we'll go from there, like and I think one of them will be the warehousing.
Yeah, I think
but-
that, because I think that's been you have been discussing it, and that's sort of
Yeah, it's been
the
hanging.
direction.
Yeah.
Sort of been heading
Right.
in, so I think that's important.
Okay.
All right. Well, I don't have adjourn on this piece of paper. But I'll entertain one anyway, motion anyway.
I'll motion that. So
All right, I have a
make
motion, I have a second, Do I have discussion? No discussion. All right. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained, motion passes 5-0-0. Thank you for joining us this evening, and have a good evening. Thank you.